It's the Blues Rock Show with Pete Francis and Willie Witten.
Welcome to the Blues Rock Show. Pete Francis alongside Willie Witten. Today, our guest is Jesse Dayton, fresh off releasing the Stardust Sessions with Samantha Fish. Jesse, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Absolutely, guys. How y'all doing?
Doing fantastic.
Right. Good.
Speaking of Samantha Fish, you two just released the Stardust Sessions. You've got Death Wish Blues coming out in May. Right. How did you two originally meet, and how did this collaboration come together?
We go back quite a ways. I mean, when she was a young girl, she would open up for me at Knuckleheads in Kansas City. And I knew right then, I was like, wow, she can really play the guitar. You know, it's the first thing you notice, really not about women, but just guitar players in general. When they're good, you go, oh, wow, that dude can play the guitar. Well, that's the way I felt with her. I was like, wow, she can really play the guitar. And then fast forward, years of grinding out and hustling and all that stuff. I end up playing a show on my way to the Outlaw Cruise music cruise in New Orleans. And her manager, who's now managing me, was an old friend of mine from like a long time ago, because me and Tab Benoit got signed at the same time when we were kids. And so anyway, that night they were like, hey, would you be interested in like going in the studio and trying some stuff? And I was like, yeah. And then one thing led to another. And, we recorded those 3 songs in like this guy's backyard in New Orleans. He had a studio back there, but it wasn't like, perfect. We were kind of just doing it to film some stuff. And we ended up like, hey, we could put this out, And then that's how it kind of all started. And I actually started working with, Sam's manager, Reuben Williams, who's in New Orleans, and Jude Chauvin, and those 2 guys. And that's kind of what got the ball rolling. Then we just ended up, writing songs. And before you know it, we were in New York, making a record with John Spencer Blues Explosion guy in Woodstock. On Rick Danko's land. It was really the band, I'm a huge fan of the band. So I was very geeked out by, I had to go see Big Pink and all that. But that's how it all kind of happened.
So Jesse, on the show we talk about blues a lot, and so one of the topics is the introduction to the blues, which for a lot of listeners can be daunting. Speaking about this album that's coming out in May, you got Death Wish that sort of leads things in, and You Know My Heart that bookends it. But other than that, I wouldn't classify this as a blues album. I would classify this more as a blues gateway album. Do you agree with that? Was that what your intent was at the outset? Because there's a lot of different sounds in here that aren't traditional or even rock blues.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is a lot of it for the listeners who are looking for it. But the thing that we were trying to do is play all those songs, like approach it from a blues standpoint, but not have traditional 12-bar, kind of, Sweet Home Chicago kind of stuff, and we both kind of look at this as an opportunity, because I'm into so much different blues. I mean, I'm as big of a blues electric guitar nerd as probably anybody that listens to your show, including you guys. I love it all, man. I grew up, seeing Stevie Ray Vaughan in clubs, and Rory Gallagher. I mean, the list just goes on and on for blues rock, but I also got into a lot of country, East Texas country blues, like, Mance Liscombe and Lightning Hopkins and stuff like that. So even on, we were thinking like, how can we make this stuff rock? How can we bring it up and really give it a shot in the arm with some energy? So yeah, I would say it's a gateway drug for sure. But if you listen to the leads that we're playing, there's a lot of Freddie King licks. I mean, it really doesn't. It's that kind of approach to the guitar playing. But the form of the songs is definitely kind of. I mean, hopefully, I would hope it's a new thing that we're reaching for.
Yeah, going back to the EP, how did you guys come up with those song choices?
Well, it was interesting because Sam picked the Townes Van Zandt song, and you'd think that's what I would pick. And that was her idea, and it turned out great. And she sings it so good. We picked the Clash song because they wanted a real rocker kind of, but not too like rockabilly, but more kind of a punky attitude. And I was like, yeah, let's just do it with big blues guitars and loud guitars. And then I ended up saying, hey, what do you think about this Magic Sam song? And we could kind of turn it into a duet, do something different with it. So that's kind of how those things, I think the Clash song just kind of presented itself, and Sam picked the Town song and I picked the Magic Sam song.
So Riders, going back to the album and off the duet idea, a song like Riders, the album you guys recorded, it sounds like it was very organic, almost a live feel.
Yeah.
That vocal interplay that you guys have on a couple of these tracks, is that just in the moment?
Yeah.
Or is that something that you scoped out? Or was that just happened organically?
Most of it happened organically, but there were a couple of, that was one of the great things about working with John Spencer. And some of your listeners might have had a few of his records. He had a few really cool records. And for the ones who don't know about him, he really took R.L. Burnside on that first, big tour where he wasn't just playing a string of shows, but it was a big tour all over. And so we kind of loved John for that. And, that whole North Mississippi groove thing it's here to stay. It ain't going nowhere. It's, people love it. I love the way the Black Keys do it. And so we were all kind of fascinated by that. So John would like treat us almost like, and we'd be in the vocal booth and he would turn on and go, man, what if you did it like this and you just really went for it? And we were like, okay, because it's fun to have a coach, it's almost like you're an actor and somebody's directing you. And he's like, let's build this character in the booth, And so that was a lot of fun. But a lot of the stuff that we did, we were just cutting up. I mean, a lot of the stuff we did, we would just kind of sling it out. And he would go, no, don't sing it any better than that, because it'll sound cooler if this, you don't care that much on this. Like, you're just throwing it out there. And I was like, okay. And, so it was really, talking about cutting the vocals, it was really a different experience, and I loved it. I thought it was a lot of fun.
Jesse, one of the things that Willie and I were talking about before we started the show was your versatility. I mean, you really kind of run the gamut, from blues to punk to country. Yeah. When you were growing up as a kid, I mean, were you pretty much just listening to everything? And how did you kind of go down that path of really just exploring all these different genres?
Well, I mean, I started out like most kids in Southeast Texas, worshiping the first 4 ZZ Top records. And I think the first record I ever bought with my own money was Fandango. And to me, that was like, Billy was like the high bar. But, my parents, my grandparents, I mean, George and Tammy are playing it, in Beaumont like once a month. It's you got 24-hour Cajun stations, which are coming over the border from Louisiana, from Lake Charles and Port Arthur and into Beaumont. And so a lot of, Cajun music, a lot of rhythm and blues, a lot of guitar players. You got the Winter Brothers there, Johnny Winter would walk into the Dairy Queen. He looked like a ghost with tattoos. That was when only sailors and motorcycle guys had tattoos, And, but I saw some amazing stuff growing up. And a lot of that gets dumped off into the stuff we're doing.
Was music always your first love? Because just not the genres, you've also branched out into different art forms. Has music always been number one in your heart? Or did you
Yeah.
start with something else?
No, I didn't. I mean, music was the first thing that gave me my identity. I didn't really know who I was. I was like most kids, just trying to find out, what I could do. And I was a terrible second baseman. And, once I started playing guitar, my brother's like, hey, you're faster than all of us, like in the first 2 weeks. You got to stick with this guitar thing. And it was just something I could do. And plus I obsessed on it, put the 10,000 hours in, and, putting on Hendrix Live in the West with like 3/4 on the turntable, like on top of the needle, just to slow the needle down. That's how I used to have to do it. Like old school. We'd have to put the record on, put the needle on, put the 3/4 on top of the needle to slow it down. And then you could kind of learn the licks. And it was crazy, but I loved, I loved growing up where I did, and I had great parents, and I don't have any big tragic, bullshit going on. But I've seen that, what really informs the real players are the guys who do it for their entire life. The lifers.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jesse, in your opinion, what do you feel makes a great guitar player?
Well, I mean, everybody is, was what came before, the tone or the technique or the feeling, the tone or the feeling. Was it the chicken or the egg? You know what I mean? It's kind of that thing that it all goes back to. I mean, if it's got tone and it's got feeling, then to me, that's the most important thing. I mean, maybe it's something that sticks in your head, guitar players write hooks, all the great early blues guys, Elmore James, all those dirty, even Hound Dog Taylor and stuff like that, those are all licks that stuck in your head. And to me, that's, it's not about shredding. And, I can play fast. I can do that if I need to, and if the part really calls for it. But for me, it's all about tone and feeling,
So I'm going to change gears here a little bit. Obviously, you've done a lot of things, got a lot of stories. I look into some of your history. How did you get connected? I'm going to pick out one specific story with Waylon Jennings and Johnny Cash, because for even people who don't know blues or country, they know those names. How did you find yourselves playing with them? How did you find that happen?
It was a crazy thing the way it all happened. And, the thing about that a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of those guys who were side guys for the Legends, in their spare time, they were playing blues and bluegrass. A lot of them were playing jazz music. There's a lot of hillbilly jazzers out there that are, monsters. And so I was too. But I'd heard all that classic country stuff growing up, and I was playing the Continental Club in Austin one night, and this woman named Evelyn Shriver came in. She was a big Nashville, I think she was the president of MCA at one point, and she was had the classic Brooklyn Jewish accent that I love. She's just, every time I was with her, I just felt like she was going to make me like some soup or something. Like she was just like very paternal and sweet. But she came in and she goes, I'll never get you on the radio out of Nashville, but I can get you on TV. And I'd love to get you on. And would you like to be on this show, Crook and Chase? So I go, and, it's the whole cliche thing. You drive your pickup truck to Nashville, you stay at this, jive ass hotel out in the bricks because you can't afford to stay where the country stars are staying. And I went up and played a song that night. And right before I went on, Evelyn comes in with Kris Kristofferson to the dressing room. And she goes, "Hey, Kris is going to be on the show tonight. I wanted to introduce you guys." So Kris comes over and we immediately start talking about, I don't know how we got on it, but Bukowski. And Kris,
The writer?
Yeah, the writer, Charles Bukowski. And I think once Kris, I can open my mouth sometimes and a banjo comes out. So I think once he realized I'd read a few books that he was like, "Oh, maybe this guy's all right." So after the show, he's like, "Hey, you want to go burn one?" So we went to the back of a town car and we went to the Gibson Guitar Factory and proceeded to talk about, whatever books and writers and the next, I thought that was it. So I went back to my hotel that night. I was like, well, that's pretty cool. I can tell everybody I met my mom's crush and, all that kind of thing. And the next morning the phone rang and it was Waylon Jennings saying, "Hey, you want to come down to the studio? I saw you on TV last night because I was watching Kris. And do you want to come down and play guitar on this track for this Willie compilation record?" And I was like, absolutely. So I drove down to Woodway Studios. I've forgotten. The listeners will know immediately. It's a legendary studio. Wood something. Anyway, I drive up and I knock on the door and Johnny Cash opens the door. Because all these guys hung out with each other like a lot when they were in town. Like, "Oh, I'm going to go over to the studio," that kind of thing. So I look at Johnny Cash and my mouth's on the floor. And he's like, "Are you going to sit there with your mouth open or come in and play that thing?" So it just, that's how it all happened. And I played on that song and then he invited me back like 2 weeks later and I played on a whole record called Right for the Time.
Yeah, that is so cool. Great story. Well, Death Wish Blues comes out on May 19th. Stardust Sessions is out now. Jesse, any final thoughts before we let you go?
No, I just want you guys to come out and see me and Sam play when we're in your neck of the woods. See if I can get that out. And holler, man. We'll put you on the list. The show's smoking, man. We're getting it dialed in, and I think my fans are finding out about her, and her fans are definitely finding about me. And it's a gas, man.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for your time, Jesse. We appreciate it.
Right on, man. Thanks, guys.
All right, for Jesse Dayton and Willie Witten, I'm Pete Francis. We'll see you next time on the Blues Rock Show.